We'll call our meeting to order. Oh,
thank you.
sorry about that. I'll start over again. Welcome, everyone, and we'll call our meeting to order. And before we begin tonight's meeting, Linda, can you just maybe go over tonight's meeting? And I know there was some question by members of the public to whether we could have tonight's meeting and so forth. So do you want to just give a briefing on that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. As are the board members are aware, Section 14, 4.2 of the Act states that a term of a member representing a municipality on a conservation authority, they remain for the term until the new appointment has been made. So in most cases, the appointments are made in December. And at that point, once the appointments have been made and the municipalities have notified the conservation authority, those new appointments, should some members be replaced or some members who are not returning, those new appointments will take effect. And if we don't hear at the December meeting, for some reason, some municipalities may not appoint for December, then the current members stay on until that new appointment has been made and the Conservation Authority has been notified formally.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So now we'll begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We have the Ganaraska Conservation Authority respectfully acknowledges that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas and Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on these lands acknowledges their resilience, their long-lasting contribution to the area. We are thankful for the opportunity to live, learn, and share with mutual respect and appreciation. I'll call upon next those having any disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Excuse me, Mark, before you go on, you only have 5, I believe, according to my.
Sorry, we do have a quorum. So
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any members with a pecuniary interest, general nature thereof? Anyone showing that? No. And then we have the minutes of the last meeting, which was October the 20th, 2022. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented? Mover Vicky, seconder Greg. Any comments or questions on those minutes? Anyone? All in favor? That's carried. And the adoption of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover for that, please? Tracy, seconder for that. Seconder, please. Nicole, anything else to add, Linda, for tonight's agenda?
Not that I'm aware of, for the agenda though, Mr. Chair, under correspondence number 8, I inadvertently put note and file, and we're actually looking for the board endorsement of the Eastern Ontario Conservation Authority's letter that addressed Bill 23. It was signed by all of the 10 conservation authorities and 35 Eastern mayors. And so when we get to that, I would just ask that the board look to endorse it rather than a note and file.
Okay, thank you, Linda. All in favor then, please? And that's carried. Next up, we have presentations. Our first presentation will come from the Ganaraska Forest Update. And I'm not sure who's going to start from the staff.
Mr. Chair, you wanted, I was asked to say a few words of this.
Yes, yes.
Prior to the meeting or prior to the presentation. So members of the board, I've been asked to address the board members with regards to presentation and statements that are being made to other member municipalities that contain information that is not accurate, not factual, or simply not true. First, I would like to address the Operation Recovery Plan. This plan was referenced to the Board of Directors during the September and again the October staff presentation. The Operational Recovery Plan, which was written as an internal staff operational document. When staff are working on large projects, whether the project be for a municipal partner such as a watershed plan or a Ganaraska project, such as the forest storm recovery, staff develop an internal working document or plan on how to approach the tasks. These plans are developed to guide staff through the process and are subject to change as needed. These work plans are not intended to go beyond staff, as they are operational and used to inform decision-making of the staff on the completion of the project. Staff work plans do not go to the board of directors for approval. Forest staff made the decision to take the work plan to the Forest Recreational Users Committee as a way to keep the members informed. The purpose of the Recreational Users Committee is to develop standards of uses within the forest, support the mitigation of user conflict and landowner conflict. As such, the staff felt by informing the Recreational Users Committee of the work plan, the committee members would be informed as to the manner in which the staff were using the recovery effort to mitigate concerns with some trails within the forest, namely trails that had been developed by others on ecologically sensitive lands, trails that cross private landowner properties and intersect and interact with municipal right-of-ways. The work plans call for these trails to be moved from the areas to another area or reclassified for the type of use where they currently exist. Members of the public have suggested that staff are trying to close down the trails in the forest, when in fact, the matter is that staff are trying to improve the placement of the trails and the trails themselves as part of the recovery. This has been explained several times. However, there are still members of the public that are not satisfied with the answer. They simply want the trails open now, no matter what the consequences to safety or legal implications with regard to landowner private property or municipal right-of-ways. There is also a concern expressed with regards to the extension of the memberships and presented in such a manner that does infer that there's no other options that were offered. Memberships are being extended for 1 full year from the date of expiry. For example, a membership that expired in September of 2022 would have access to the forest all last fall, through the winter, and into the spring of 2022 when the closure occurred. It is accurate that when the forest reopened in September, the end of September of 2022, it did so on a very limited basis. Memberships, when they expire, are being extended a full year. A refund option is also available to all members. Therefore, if a member is unhappy with the limited trail system or for any reason that they care about, they can get a refund for that membership. There is no member that would be turned down for a membership, and it would be prorated for their memberships. Some members have taken refunds, while others have chosen to access the forest for either their main interests, such as motorized use or hiking, and all memberships include hiking. So all members are welcome to hike in the sections that are open. It has also been suggested that the 2018-2038 Forest Management Plan was not considered and the recommendations not respected. This is not accurate. The Forest Management Plan was consulted in the recovery efforts. The plan is implemented and being followed. The Forest Management Plan was developed to provide guidance and recommendations for the sustainable use and conservation of the Ganaraska forest. The Forest Management Plan recognizes a multi-use forest to be used in a safe manner. The plan outlines how forest operations and recreation interactions are to be managed. Staff have been very diligent in all of their efforts to consult previous documents. Again, this was articulated during previous staff presentations. It has also been stated that after the October 20th, 22 delegations to the Board of Directors, a motion was passed asking staff to report back that day and at the next board meeting. The motion from the October 20th, 22 delegations was that the information was to be received and referred to staff. Staff answered questions that same evening through their presentation and will be answering questions tonight through their presentation. It was also stated that the staff have not paused their action despite the request for accountability to the board. There was no direction to pause actions of the staff. In fact, the board stated they support the actions of the staff. Staff are updating the board of directors on a monthly basis at the meetings on the progress of the work carried out in the forest. It should also be noted that the resolution that was passed stated that the board of directors of the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority acknowledges that the staff has a difficult job and recognizes that staff are professionals in their fields and that staff have the full support of the board of directors. And further that the board of directors of the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority will not tolerate harassment and or bullying towards staff as they carry out their responsibilities. With regards to the 2023 budget, it has been stated that there is a 14% increase in the Conservation Land Management Program. This is not true. The Conservation Land Management budget, as in the preliminary budget, is approximately a 16% decrease from 2022. It has also been stated that a larger shortfall than the $140,000 forecasted should be expected. There has been no shortfall forecasted, nor will there be any shortfall in the 2023 budget. Any reduction in membership fees and day passes that will occur in 2022 or 3 and 22 have been accounted for. So there will be no shortfall. Any adjustments in decreased revenues were made during 2022, and they're offset by the fact that some of the expenditures just simply are not taking place. And that's to compensate for the reduced revenues. Again, staff have been very diligent to forecast the 2023 budget to ensure that there will be no shortfall, and to infer anything else is just simply not factual. In 2020, when COVID-19 caused a $600,000 loss in revenues after the budget had been developed, staff took up action to ensure that the GRCA did not move into a deficit position. The board of directors commended staff on taking such action to prevent a deficit. Staff are very conscientious in all areas and take the accountability for the finances of the municipal levy dollars and the other funding received very seriously. Lastly, the revenues of the forest recreational program are made up from levy at approximately 20% and other funds, which includes membership fees, day passes, employment programs, and revenues from treetop trekking. Again, staff take pride in providing watershed municipalities with exceptional programs and services carried out in a professional manner and utilizing the levy provided by the municipalities in the most cost-effective manner to provide those programs and services. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Conservation Land Management staff can now provide their update.
Thank you, Linda. And if anyone from the board wishes a copy of what Linda has just stated, because I do know that it's handy to have that when it comes to at your council level, especially when they're asking for the budget to be passed, it would be nice to have that information there. So if you need a copy of that, Linda would be more than happy to send that to you. Okay, who's going to speak now on behalf of staff? Pam, I presume? Yes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Pam.
And Linda, I do just need to let me share my screen. Give me a moment. While she's doing that, so thank you, Mr. Chair, Board of Directors, staff, and those in the gallery. Here we go. Okay, so I'll just, Mr. Chair, can you confirm that you can see my slide?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. My name is Pam Lancaster, Conservation Lands Coordinator at the Ganaraska Conservation Authority. Tonight's presentation is again in 3 parts. I will start on a general update around some administrative things, as well as Linda mentioned, speaking to some of the questions that were remaining from last meeting's delegation. Then I'll hand it over to Gus Sawyer, our forester, to speak on forestry update, and then on to Ed Van Osh, our forest recreation technician, to speak on trail updates. So Linda has already spoken to this in her opening statements. I guess just for the ease of numbers, it's just reiterated here that the membership extension occurred on memberships purchased between June 1st, 2021 and May 21st, 2022, which means that every member will receive a free 12-month extension from the original membership's expiry date. So that means that now expiries will go from June of 2023 to May of 2024. With cross-country ski memberships, they are receiving a 6-month hiking membership for free. And as Linda also stated, that part of the membership process is that when a motorized membership is purchased, it includes the ability to partake in all non-motorized activities except for cross-country skiing. So that means our motorized users can come in and hunt if they have the applicable ability to hunt, horseback ride, mountain bike, and hike. And when a specific non-motorized pass is purchased, not including hiking, it includes the ability to partake in all other non-motorized activities. So if you are a horseback rider, you can then also cycle, hike, and hunt. And of course, given the snow on the ground, that also means hikers and everybody can equally snowshoe. And as Linda mentioned, if members are dissatisfied with the trails that are available for use, refunds are and have been since that we closed on the day of the storm, been provided based on a prorating of the original membership timeframe. And we have been doing those. The other topic that we just wanted to re-clarify was on the role and engagement of volunteers. So as stated at last meeting, volunteers and partners are always used to support the recreational programming, but also through storm recovery efforts. And this will occur when the following conditions can be met. The work environment is safe for our volunteers. The tasks are appropriate to the skill level of that individual. Appropriate personal protective equipment is used by the volunteer. The task is meaningful to the recovery efforts and/or the recreational program, and that proper training of volunteers occur related to the task that they are undertaking. And that may be training that we do ahead of that actual event, or it might mean doing outside training requiring certain sorts of certification to ensure that they are trained appropriately for the task at hand. There have been questions and staff wanted to provide an update on the work being done to engage with the volunteer community through organizations. So the authority has always had a trail maintenance program, and during the past few months, we've improved it slightly and improved some of the forms that are used for people to apply. So under a one-year agreement, and it's a calendar 1 year, volunteer groups and organizations are able to carry out trail maintenance to support recreational opportunities within the Ganaraska Forest. And it's important to note that activities such as cutting trees or dealing with poison ivy that we equally need to deal with, cutting vegetation, grading trail surfaces are actually all prohibited under the Conservation Authorities Act, but through supervision by staff and approval of what those removal activities are, they can occur, again, through a volunteer program such as our trail maintenance program. So there's an application that's filled out, and currently staff are reviewing 2 trail maintenance applications that will support trail work related to equestrian and mountain bike uses. GRCA staff are also in communications with the Ontario Federation of Trail Riders, and that is a provincial dirt bike organization, regarding single track use in the West and East Forest, which is where that use type is permitted. Another topic that deserves a little bit of further explanation that is being asked through delegations and by the community at large is off-road vehicle use in the Ganaraska Forest. So in order for the GRCA to authorize off-road vehicle use in the forest, and in specific in the West and the East Forests, the following conditions must be met. The off-road vehicle operator and the passengers, which can be more than one, each must have in possession a valid membership or day pass. If they do not, actually under the Conservation Authorities Act, these uses are not permitted on conservation lands unless they are done so through a permit, which are permits a membership or day pass, and that their trails are designated for those uses, which in the case of the forest, we have trails designated for motorized use. Additionally, the off-road vehicle itself, the operator and the passengers must adhere to provincial regulations. And there's various regulations and legislation out there that they have to be mindful of. According to the Off-Road Vehicle Act, the off-road vehicle itself must be plated, and this is a green and white plate, insured and registered. So this is also a requirement for use in the forest. And where trails cross a municipal right-of-way, the operator must have a valid driver's license. And this is all according to provincial legislation. Additionally, recreational operation of an off-road vehicle is prohibited on municipal roads and right-of-ways surrounding the Ganaraska forest. So again, these are all some of the considerations. There's other ones we also do give when considering how off-road vehicles can can operate in the forest. The last topic I was going to touch on before passing it off to Gus is reference of the Ganaraska Forest Management Plan. Linda has spoken to it in her opening words, and at the last meeting we also spoke to its relationship in recreational management in the forest. It's important to note that all of my slides covering this topic are taken directly from the plan. I've not rewritten them. So again, I will paraphrase some of them, but basically the purpose of the forest management plan is for the guidance and is to provide guidance and recommendations for the sustainable use and conservation of the Ganaraska forest. As part of that process, public consultation was undertaken and a synopsis report was written by a consultant, which is included as a reference in the appendix to this plan. And this next paragraph explains the intent of the synopsis report, which was to provide GRCA staff who are responsible for writing the management plan with important community and stakeholder insight about issues, challenges, and opportunities facing the Ganaraska forest. This synopsis report will also provide important direction for the plan authors concerning the inclusion of forest management practices that promote safe and sustainable enjoyment of the Ganaraska forest for generations to come. So definitely recreation has been considered in the Ganaraska Forest Management Plan as it pertains to the operational tasks of managing a forest. Again, in section 11 of the plan, there is a section that talks about managing interactions between different topics. So the two that I have pulled from here is the relationship between ecology and recreation, and the relationship between forest operations and recreation. And the Coles Note version is that ecology is the main consideration to trail placement, trail use management, and is the main reason why we will consider moving trails away from ecologically sensitive areas in the forest. When it comes to forestry operations and recreation, we always want to make sure that the authority is communicating clearly where operations are in the forest so that it gives users advance notice where trail closures may occur because of the operations. There is a requirement that no debris be left from forestry operations on the trails, and that is tied to contractual obligations that the authority and more importantly, the contractors have in the contract to make sure that when operations are occurring around trails, that mitigation potential damage is mitigated by the forestry operations. And this is done with staff support by flagging trails and after doing trail inspections. Of course, these are big pieces of machinery, and so damage is a high potential because of the type of machines, but they are required and do what they can to put trails back to their original condition, and then staff will further go in and do some fine tuning if needed. And finally, our operations ensure that the timing of forestry operations, if able, adjust to the seasonal recreational use of the forest. So when the operations are being planned and kind of a route of how to move between operational sites is considered, it considers the seasonal recreational use that occurs throughout the forest. The last little bit in the forest management plan, and this would be in section 12, is a summary of recommendations. So under recreational recommendations, there are 4 of them. That the forest management plan supports access to the forest by families and individuals while recognizing the value of the forest for human health, wellness, and active living. And this support of access is by fulfilling the recommendations that I just stated. These are the things that the forest management operations is able to do to support access to the forest and within the forest. The Ganaraska forest is a multi-use forest, and where possible, forest management will adjust its prescriptions and operations to ensure that recreation is supported. So an example of this is if we are looking to possibly create new trail or make trail alterations or deal with hazard trees, we will consult with our contractors to see if they can do some of that work for us or pieces of that work. This was stated at last meeting that although the forest management plan is not able to fully address all the recreational use and opportunities and concerns, it is recommended that GRCA staff continue to work towards resolutions of matters brought forward. And when it says Appendix 5, those would be the matters brought forward in the stakeholder engagement process and as summarized in the synopsis report. And then finally, forest operations will be integrated into the multi-use program of the Ganaraska Forest, and road and trail closures will only be implemented when and if there are public safety concerns. And now this is in addition, that's like for when the actual operation is occurring. The other criteria about moving trails is based on criteria such as ecological considerations. So that was my little part of tonight's presentation and update. So I'll now pass it on to Gus, and Gus, you can just say next slide when you're ready.
Yep, will do. Thank you very much, Pam. So as mentioned, I'm Gus Sawyer. I'm the forester here for the Ganaraska Forest. And my update tonight is a little bit more straightforward compared to our past couple board meetings. Going to go over some of the progress on how we're doing on the salvage front, as well with our regular thinning operations. But I just wanted to point out that all the pictures that I've taken are fresh pictures. So what you're seeing is exactly how it's looking like in the forest right now. And this particular photo is up just south of Boundary and Ganaraska Road, working its way to the tail end of our first salvage. So you can go to the next slide, please, Pam, or whoever's in control. So our first salvage operation, the GANSALV 0122, this job, as a reminder, is being done by Robinson Forestry Products. They're also in charge of our second salvage harvest that's more towards the Boundary and Porter Road area. As mentioned in the previous meetings, we're skipping a good chunk of that stuff and holding it off till next year. And they're only going to be cleaning up the stuff that was immediately damaged because they're making their way over to the forest center for our regular thinning operations once they're done in here. So with regards to the first salvage harvest, they're literally at the tail end of it right now. They're currently working in a strip of oak that was blown down right at the south side of Boundary and Ganaraska Road. Once they're done, as mentioned, they're going to be moving into some of the blowdown that's in the second salvage area and then eventually over to the forest center. So from our last update on October 18th, we're now looking at 109 truckloads of material have come out of this salvage. That's 20 more truckloads from the last update, equating to about 6,700 tons of wood. And that's 1,400 more tons than before. And then just in the photo there, I want to point it out so you can kind of see it's a little tough to make out, but if you look in there, you'll see that there's a bunch of large oak logs that have been cut out. The way that they kind of work through this area, I was kind of hoping that they'd be a little bit further in their operations and more towards the forest center by now. However, when you're working through these hardwood blowdowns especially, they have to come through and first pick up all the smaller material, the firewood material. And then by doing so, that gives them the space to safely work around the bigger material. So after the firewood was cleaned up, they then came in with chainsaws and topped off the logs so that they could safely go in with the machine after, cut it at the base, and then salvage the log out of that. If they had just gone around and cut the material just straight with the machine, they'd risk splitting the wood, and then it would all go to waste because it's not usable at the mill. So that's why you'll see it's nice and cleaned up in there. They've stacked all of the logs on the ground there to be forwarded out. All the firewood has already been cleaned up. And then a lot of the hardwood trees, if you look on the border of this gap here, I wish I could show you guys with my mouse, it'd be a lot easier, but you'll see a lot of tall white pines, and the hardwood trees without any leaves in the back there are all oaks as well. So when we're trying to grow oak and white pine, one of the ways that we can do that is by creating gaps. And when we're doing that, you kind of want to aim for a gap that's about 1.5 tree lengths in size. So if we're taking a look at some of those trees that are on the periphery there, if you were to kind of tip them horizontally and lay them across the ground, the gap that we've got created there by this storm is kind of roughly in that tree length and a half gap. So I'm hoping by us coming through, salvaging out the material, and as well as having the machines in there to stir up the mineral soil in there, it's going to create some ideal conditions to regenerate some red oak and white pine in there. So kind of an ideal scenario that we're aiming for there. Next slide, please. And then our other update on the salvage is our third salvage area and our fourth salvage area. So these jobs were being done by Cedarscape Industries. And just to remind you, the main salvage area was the one that was here by the Forest Center. That's been mostly cleaned up. There's a small patch that's been left, but we're going to be doing that with our regular thinning operations. Chances are that most of that stuff, because it was softwood that was down, unfortunately has probably stained and gone rotten. So the guys probably won't be able to use it, but we'll get them to clean it up and at least get the main trails open through that stretch so that at least we can try to salvage some of the stuff that's in there. Unfortunately, though, with Cedarscape Industries, this was in the last update too, they've been having some serious machine troubles. Unfortunately, they haven't been in since, so there's no change on this front. That said, I've been trying to look into backup options for this if they're not able to continue. I'm happy that we've got all the softwood stuff salvaged already, so we're only kind of left with the hardwood, and we're not under the same time crunch against stain with the hardwood stuff. We would be able to work with that next year. And I'm starting to probe kind of around with some of our other contractors, including the ones that are working our first two salvage areas, to see if they might have some interest. And they have, but we're going to play that by ear and see if we're to do any of the smaller little hardwood patches that have been blown down. I'm going to guess that that's probably going to be next year, but it's going to be a little bit touch and go on that front. Next slide, please. And on our thinning operations, these are our regular scheduled thinnings for the year. As mentioned, Robinson Forest Products, they're still working on the salvage. And after they're done there, they're going to be coming over to the Forest Center. I'm hoping that that should be within the next week or two. I'm hoping. We've had some slowdowns on top of working through that slow process in the oak. It was also the opening of hunting season, which is like the national holiday for the forest industry. A lot of places will just straight up shut down during this first week or two of deer season, and it's impacted all of our logging operators this year as normal. And then our other regular thinning operations, which was being done by Holcomb & Sons, they're actually completed as of yesterday. So all the harvesting and forwarding is done. They've now floated out their equipment. However, there is still a lot of material that's still on the landings that's going to be trucked out over the next few weeks, but otherwise they're done. And I just wanted to highlight with some photos of the last area that they were working in. So you can see here, we're looking at a mixed plantation of red pine and red oak. And the loggers have come through, they've worked their way along the trail, or they've cut through an access trail there that has already been previously established. They've taken the marked trees there, and as you can see, we've targeted, red pine that were adjacent to the red oaks. And the idea with that being, we're going to release those red oak canopies so that those can develop and get nice healthy crowns on them. they can rain down some nice little acorns below, and then that way we can get some sprouting action coming up underneath. And then a next slide, please. And this is just another photo of the red pine plantation that they finished off. So this area was actually well overdue for a cut. The material that's in here is probably about the size of telephone poles right now. It was very thick in here. And prior to the harvest, it was essentially completely shaded in there. And I just wanted to show you guys some photos of what it's looking like now after we've had our thinning operations come through. So they've come in and reduced the density of trees by about 1/3, which is what we kind of tend to do with all of our red pine thinning, so that we get that gradual progression of light that allows a gradual growth in the understory. So you can see we've got some great spacing in the crowns now. And I took a photo standing on one of the stumps of the red pines that we removed, just looking up, so that you can see that crown spacing that we're now getting. So we've got roughly about 1/2 of a crown of space in between all the trees. And that equates to about a 50 to 60% light down to the understory, which is the ideal conditions for growing red oak and white pine. So I was very happy with how this job went. They did an excellent job. And yeah, nothing but rave reviews for these guys. And I believe that is the end of my slide, so I'll pass it off to Ed now.
Hello there, everybody. Can everybody see me there?
Yep.
All right, my name is Ed Ganaraska. I am the forest recreation technician, and I'm going to be updating you on some of the trail work and partnerships that we have been developing here over the past couple of weeks since our last meeting. Next slide, please. So the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs has been working closely with the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority. And together we've hosted 3 volunteer work days in October and November. GRCA's role in these work days was assisting with hazardous tree removal, tree blockages, traffic control, and facilitating volunteer tasks. The OFSC were their work days, their volunteer days, and they brought in their volunteers, and like I said, staff was there to assist the OFSC in succeeding during those days. So the OFSC, the directors, they supervised each work crew, and they were responsible for leading their work crews. And we were very successful during these work days. As of today, all of the OFSC trails within the West Forest of the Ganaraska Forest are now clear of all major blockages that we know of. And the OFSC will continue with their volunteers to remove any encroaching materials prior to the snowmobile season. And if you look to the image on the right-hand side there, that was a typical blowdown that was occurring throughout the West Forest system. Next slide, please. Okay, so the OFSC required volunteers to sign in prior to being able to work with the OFSC, and that was to be covered under the OFSC liability insurance. Unfortunately, on the first volunteer day that we worked with there, we had some unforeseen planning challenges and liability issues where the OFSC and the GRCA had to turn away some volunteers. Fortunately, this issue was rectified on subsequent work days. One of the issues that we also dealt with OFSC and the GRCA require all necessary PPE to be utilized at all times while on work site. We'll skip to the next slide, please. Thank you. You'll see on the right-hand side there, that is the typical type of forestry PPE or personal protective equipment that is required for a forestry site. So we have safety boots, hard hats, leather work gloves, high visibility clothing, chainsaw protective pants for chainsaw operators, safety glasses and hearing protection, among others. And in red there, you see volunteers must meet PPE requirements to participate in work efforts on GRCA owned lands. Next slide, please. So one of the major issues that we encounter as property managers are not all volunteers are familiar with working with site-specific forestry hazards or forestry work sites. Prior to our volunteer work days, staff, myself, spoke to the volunteer groups to create awareness of known hazards or possibly unknown hazards or unseen hazards that could be found within a forestry work site. And during the volunteer work day held on November 6th, there were 2 near misses that were witnessed by myself, where some volunteers came into hazard zones where we had to quickly act. So good thing nobody was injured. It's just something that staff and other volunteer organizations and volunteers just need to be aware of while working on forestry sites. We'll go to the next slide, please. And then I have an update on our ski trail system. So in response to some logging delays and timing that we've had approaching the ski season, GRCA will be bringing an additional heavy equipment operation contractors to work along several stretches of the ski trail system, specifically the Yellow Trail, the A Loop, and the C Loop. This equipment will be utilized to clear trail hazards. We'll be rerouting or taking out some corners that cause some challenges for users or also for maintenance issues. And we'll be addressing any trail surface hazards that we might encounter, i.e. stumps or stones or anything that's been left over from logging activities or from the storm itself that occurred in May. And this work, the staff plan to continue this redevelopment or the fixing of the ski and snowshoe trails in subsequent years. And I believe that's it for me.
Great. Well, thank you, staff, for your presentations. We'll go to board members. Questions from board members? Anyone with any questions? I think it was a pretty thorough presentation. And Nicole, question, comment?
I do, thank you. I just want to thank staff for the detailed summations. A bit of a question similar to my one last time, and I apologize if I missed in the verbal report. So there's no opportunity for additional members or groups to get involved in volunteer cleanup. Is that what I'm hearing? Or as long as they meet the credentials as outlined by staff?
Yeah, so I can answer that, Mr. Chair, if you would like. So, so yes, there is always opportunities for volunteer groups at this particular time to work with the authority through the processes and the criteria outlined. Right now, that's being facilitated through the Trail Maintenance Program, where again, there's an application that the groups that meet the eligibility requirements apply under. We staff are looking at the ability of hosting more community-based volunteer events, but that won't be until the bulk of this hazardous work is done. Again, the skill sets required is not appropriate now to have kind of an open call for volunteers. Yeah.
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, Nicole? Yeah. Anyone else with any comments or questions? Tracy?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's really, it brings a lot of things up to light. I know from my perspective as a councillor on the south end of City of Kawartha Lakes, I've had to deal with a lot of the same issues, and I'm, triple over budget. We've got a lot of work done. We are not finished cleaning up, and some of that we can't get to until after winter maintenance is done now. So I certainly understand. And also, I was just wondering, Gus, being the forester in there, have you not seen a lot of widow makers through the forest, like some trees that are compromised that you're still a little bit leery about, moving forward? Just, I know that it's happened down in our location a few times.
Yeah, 100% that those are still present throughout the forest and it's kind of everywhere. Just with all the efforts that we've done on the trails, our main routes are all clear for the most part and free of widowmakers. I'm sure Ed could evaluate on that more if that's not the case, but all the ones that I have seen have been more on the off-trail areas where, I mean, either it's small single track that's going through there at most, or it's completely off-trail. So no one should be in there and it's kind of safely away from wherever the public could access.
Okay, anything else, Tracy? You're good?
No, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else with any further questions or comments on this? I just have one. I'll just ask quickly. How are we as far as meeting our deadlines? Are we looking still at December as opening up for ski trails and so forth?
Yes, Mr. Chair, as Ed mentioned, I'll work through the various forest compartments. The work that was done in partnership with OFSC did result in additional trails opening in the central east part of the West Forest.
Okay.
I'll throw all the directions out there in my statement, but more trails were open in the West Forest, which benefits all users that access the trail system off of Boundary Road by Highway 115. Regarding the Central Forest trails, the goal was for January opening of our ski trail season, and that is still the goal that we're working towards. As both Ed and Gus alluded to, it is still operationally heavy, and we have to equally make adjustments as our contractors have challenges of their own. So plan E, I think we're on now, is bringing in additional operators specific on opening the bigger blockages on our ski trails. That is just, it would take people power weeks to do. So again, we're readjusting to hold to that timeline, as it is our goal for January opening.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, can I have a motion then to receive the presentations for information purposes then, please? Mover, please. Bruce, seconder. Seconder, Vicky, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a presentation dealing with Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, and that's for 2022. Can I have who's going to be doing that, Linda?
It is Corey and Ken, I believe.
Corey and Ed? Yep.
And just in case I don't get a chance to speak after their presentation, there is a rally. I'll just bring this to the board's attention so you're aware. There is a rally planned for tomorrow at 11 o'clock outside. The one in this area is outside Minister Pacini's office in Port Hope.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, it's all yours, Corey.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen here. Make sure everyone can see what I'm seeing. Everyone can see that?
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, let me try this again. Okay. How do I get out of it? Still nothing?
No, you're on screen now. We see a slide.
Yeah,
no. So
you're there, Corey. Just start that. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So tonight, Ken and I wanted to give you an update, or I guess an introduction and some Cole's notes on Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act. So there's a few things we want to touch on. We just want to introduce the basics of what is being proposed, give some background and context, talk about how the bill will impact conservation authorities, and then the implications on conservation authorities' roles in local planning and hazard regulation, and then wrap up with a bit of a summary. So you may have seen in the news that Bill 23 was introduced into the legislature on October 25th. It's had its second reading. It's been referred to the Standing Committee on Heritage Infrastructure and Cultural Policy. This committee was receiving comments on the bill until about an hour ago. And GRCA did send a letter in partnership with the Eastern Ontario Conservation Authorities to the Premier, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, as well as Minister Piccini. The bill is significant. It proposes sweeping changes to land use planning and management of natural hazards and natural heritage, among other important planning matters in Ontario. So Bill 23 includes, I guess, the second phase of changes of this current government's proposed updates and changes to the conservation authorities. Bill 229, the Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, was passed in December 2020. And out of that came a number of regulations. I've posted 3 here. So the first one, 68621, is the Mandatory Programs and Services Regulation. It is essentially requiring all conservation authorities to do a service inventory. And the board may recall we brought some information to the board in the spring on that. The next regulation was the transition plans and agreements for the programs and services. And then there's also a rules of conduct in conservation areas reg that was passed as well. All conservation authorities are working at addressing these requirements of the first 2 regs. The program and service inventory, as I mentioned, was circulated earlier this year, and staff will be reaching out to our partners in our municipalities in the new year to discuss those service inventories and talk about the memorandums of understanding and service level agreements that we'll be entering into next year. Additional regs were made earlier this year from that first phase, and they're really dealing with standardizing information between CAs and how information is reported to the public on their websites. And it also speaks to how budgets are prepared so that there's some consistency there as well. A lot of CAs were already doing this stuff, but they wanted to make sure all CAs were in line with this. I put this slide in just to show the scale of what's being proposed. So Bill 23 is 78 pages of legislative changes. Nothing in Ontario regarding planning is untouched. And there's a lot of postings that are listed on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. And you can get a sense on the right-hand side of this slide, just some of the changes that are up for comment. The comment deadlines vary. Some of them were 30 days, some of them are to the end of the year. So if you're interested in commenting on any of this, make sure to go to the ERO site and check in and comment as you feel necessary. You may also recall that on Remembrance Day last week, the province opened up the Greenbelt and as well as the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. So everything's on the table. So I'm going to pass it on to Ken, and he's going to walk through some of the changes in the planning side.
As Corey mentioned, it's a huge bill, but this bill in particular affects conservation authorities in 4 main ways: in a role in plan review, a role in Section 28 permitting, our fees, and in conservation lands. In particular, the Conservation Authority will not be able to perform a review and commenting role other than as it relates to natural hazards under the following acts, and in particular is the Planning Act that's highlighted here. So the Conservation Authority, when we do get a Planning Act application, The Conservation Authority will undertake our roles and responsibilities, particularly as they relate to natural hazards. We're looking at floodplains, erosion hazards, shorelines, impacts to wetlands, but immediately we also look at stormwater management, natural heritage, and hydrogeology. And we do this on behalf of the municipality, and we have done this for a number of years. If this bill passes in its current form, we won't be able to continue to perform this service even with MOUs or service level agreements in place. This would remove a consistent one window approach that GRCA has reliably provided for our municipal partners over the years. So just to touch on some of these items, with respect to stormwater management, we do have a water resources engineer. Currently, Leslie Benson does a review, and she knows a watershed inside and out. She knows stormwater management and has many years experience. We base our comments on acceptable technical and engineering guidelines that the municipalities and the Conservation Authority have created, and these can be easily updated by qualified staff. We have significant data and experience in dealing with these matters, and we review development within the context of watershed and the subwatershed to assess downstream flooding impacts. We have to make sure through any application that what happens upstream is not going to have a downstream impact. The proposed changes are silent of the role of integrated watershed management and subwatershed studies. We also do reviews for natural heritage. We look at environmental impact studies and review those studies. We do have a biologist on staff that undertakes that role, and we look at these. A lot of the times, developers or landowners will be calling the Conservation Authority to get advice and feedback as to what they would be requiring for development. And in addition to talking about our roles in natural hazards, we also provide them feedback in terms of what they would be looking for as it may relate to the natural heritage component. Ultimately, though, the municipality makes the final decision, and we definitely work with stakeholders to minimize the requirements for studies and prevent the need for studies where they're not required. This would effectively remove the role of the municipality would now be responsible for this, and we wouldn't even be able to weigh in on that. We also do the review on hydrogeology and groundwater. We have a hydrogeologist on staff, Dr. Jessica Muller, to complete reviews. We review submissions to ensure compliance with industry standards and the provincial policy statement on behalf of the municipalities. And again, ultimately, the municipality makes the final decision. Maintaining this current approach makes sense as there are synergies and efficiencies with the Conservation Authority's role in drinking water source protection. I do have an application right now. We're looking at all these items. There's hazards on the site. We're looking at hydrogeology. We're looking at natural heritage, and we're looking at stormwater management. Another item is our the Section 28 permitting. Currently, when we have our permits before the board, essentially I'm saying a permit when it's issued meets 5 tests. Those 5 tests being flooding, erosion, conservation of land, dynamic beaches, and pollution. There's going to be the removal of 2 of those, conservation of land and pollution. The implications of that are that the conservation authorities may no longer be able to require effective sediment and erosion controls in our permitting process. So there could be and it may affect our ability to require certain setbacks for development. Just being out on site earlier this year, checking erosion sediment control, or earlier this week, I should say, checking erosion sediment controls on a subdivision site. We were out there to assist and on looking at these erosion sediment controls. That may not be a role in our future, and certainly concerning. The addition to, and again, it would just be the addition of unstable soils and bedrock as that additional test. Some other changes. The province is looking to determine how development pressures on wetlands, woodlands, and other natural habitat could be offsite. There's going to be changes to the Ontario wetland evaluation system. They're removing the wetland component out of the MNRF, and it's really kind of unclear as to what agency is going to have domain over wetlands. The provincial natural hazard technical guidelines are under review. There's going to be a streamlining of approvals for low risk activities, for instance, deck drains that won't require a permit. There's also indication that the conservation authorities won't issue a permit where there's a Planning Act application in place. Now, I'm not quite sure what this will mean if, because there's certain applications, Planning Act applications that may require less requirements than others. So usually what we would do is we may be fine with a Planning Act application, but we deal with the detailed submission in the permitting stage. And we always do try and make sure that is done as quickly as possible. There will be a reduced regulatory area from wetlands, particularly those wetlands that are provincially significant or greater than 2 hectares in size, from 120 meters down to 30 meters. And there is a flexibility for a conservation authority to issue a permit for a greater length of validity. There would be a consolidation of all 36 conservation authorities regulations into one. Currently, we have a regulation for each conservation authority, and there will be one regulation. We haven't yet to see that at this time. There's going to be an updated watercourse definition. There's going to be a requirement to develop, consult on, make publicly available a policy, complete application requirements, timelines, process for review if timelines are not met, technical details, and some other items as indicated here. There's going to be the minister can direct fees or can direct conservation authorities not to charge fee amounts for a specified period. That means that conservation authority fees can be frozen for a certain period of time. The other item here as well is that the conservation authority lands, conservation land inventory now needs to identify lands that could support housing development and enable conservation authorities to use streamlined process to sever and dispose of land, also simplified disposition process for lands acquired through provincial grants. It's not likely that this is going to have a significant impact on our watershed, though. What others are saying with Conservation Ontario, it's going to weaken the ability of conservation authorities to continue protecting people and property from natural hazards. It's going to place new responsibilities on municipalities related to natural hazards and natural resources that they are unprepared and under-resourced to take. Diminish the ability to protect critical natural infrastructure like wetlands that reduce flooding and protect water quality in lakes and rivers. The recommendations provided by Conservation Ontario is to allow municipalities to enter into agreements with conservation authorities for review and comment on development applications, such as with respect to natural heritage and water resources plan review, which is what we currently do. Development subject to Planning Act authorization should not be exempt from requiring Conservation Authority permit and Conservation Authority regulations and not be delegated to municipalities. The GRCA does strive to get permits out as soon as possible. Typically, the average permit's in for less than a week in our office, and only those that do require a significant amount of review are in for a longer period of time. The multi-stakeholder Conservation Authority Working Group needs to continue working with the province to provide advice and solutions for successful implementation. The working group was disbanded, I guess for lack of a better word, there after we went back under the umbrella of the MNRF, and it's recommended that group is put back together. The Conservation Authority development fees should not be frozen since they are based on cost recovery, and careful consideration is required when identifying Conservation Authority lands to support housing development. With AMO, Bill 23 proposes numerous changes to the Development Charges Act and Planning Act that, if passed, will significantly impact how municipal governments recover the costs associated with growth. Here, the cumulative impact of proposed changes to municipal fees and charges is significant and contracted to the widely accepted concept that growth should pay for growth. Although they would like to support the housing objectives, it's been stated it cannot support changes that largely place a burden of carrying the costs associated with development onto municipalities.
I'll add a few comments here on the final few slides. Another perspective here is the Canadian Environmental Law Association. They've made some they've raised some concerns with the bill and the legislation as well. They've acknowledged here that Ontario's highly expert conservation authorities are established and work on a watershed basis. And this is something that has been really not even talked about in the bill. You know, doing planning on a watershed basis has its genesis like 75 years ago when the Conservation Authorities Act was formed. And it appears that that history has been forgotten. They also add here that they've got concerns with Bill 23 removing or taking away roles that CAs have on commenting and providing those commenting services to our municipal partners. They also have concerns with deleting those tests that Ken had referred to, pollution and conservation of land, removing those from our review processes. So just a couple slides on summary of the bill and the impacts. These changes will indeed have significant impacts to the efficiency of the review process. I think it's going to have the opposite effect of what the bill is intending to do. It's adding expense and cost to the municipalities that ultimately are going to have to be borne by the taxpayer. Municipalities should really be given the freedom to enter into agreements with conservation authorities for advisory services. You know, GRCA as well as a lot of the other CAs have the capacity and expertise, and we've traditionally provided those services for very low cost. So if a municipality has to go out now and hire consultants to help them determine whether or not they meet the tests in the provincial policy statement, those are added costs and timelines that aren't really being planned for at this point, and it's going to, I think, derail approval timelines in the future. CAs should really retain responsibility for natural hazard approvals. We are the experts on that. We've been doing it for many, many years, and it is a cost-effective model. These arrangements offer value for money and cost savings, as well as certainty and predictability in the development review process. And CAs have been providing those solutions to help solve local issues for over 75 years. The plan review process that the CAs undertake in partnership with the municipalities does ensure the protection of the watershed-based approach, and it enables that connections within the watershed, connections like flood control and the role and value of wetlands and other green infrastructure or natural cover, what those impacts have upstream and downstream of an area of development. When you look at things through this lens at a watershed level, it ensures safe development does occur. Development really should pay for development. The taxpayers shouldn't be paying for putting in infrastructure to support development. You know, there are exceptions, but that general principle really makes sense. Putting a freeze on Conservation Authority development fees will create a larger issue and a gap in funds for services that will have to be made up at some point in the future. CA planning, review, and permitting fees are based on cost recovery. There's currently no mechanism being proposed to make up for the shortfall in the future. We've been directed to aim for cost recovery, and in some cases full cost recovery for planning fees. And Bill 23 is considering freezing our fees, so we can't really recover fees if they're being frozen. So that's a difficult situation. When downloading to responsibilities to municipalities, we need to consider how development in one jurisdiction does impact, either a downstream or an adjacent municipality, and really the watershed lens is the best one to use for assessing that type of impact. One size solution does not fit every situation, and I think that's what a lot of the smaller CAs are trying to communicate, as well as smaller municipalities where we really do collaborate and work well together. Ken and I have often talked about the fact that we see ourselves as an extension of the municipal office. So we pick up the phone and call our colleagues on a daily basis, and the relationship works really well. They rely on us, we rely on them for their expertise, and it's a great partnership. Proposed changes need to balance growth with the environment, public health and safety. One should really not occur at the expense of the other. That's something that's being raised by a lot of folks. CAs are not a barrier to growth. Timely reviews are currently provided, and service enhancement improvements have continued throughout the whole Conservation Authorities Act review process over the last few years. If a CA is removed from a large part of the plan review process, the municipality, as I mentioned before, they're going to need to hire their own experts and/or retain a consultant. And I'll leave it there, and Ken and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you both. I'll just wait till the screen changes. Okay, questions from board members? Anyone? Nicole, yes?
Thank you. I appreciate the staff's comments and I agree with them wholeheartedly. I am very concerned about this, obviously for many reasons, from the environmental sustainability to the disruption of the partnerships with the CAs, to I think it's very undemocratic and taking away local municipal decision-making. All that said, Linda, I want to acknowledge, I didn't get back to you about signing the letter as deputy mayor, only because I was advised that I should be seeking permission of all of council. And I'm not quite sure if our mayor would have signed it. I've been signing things as I can, letter submissions and writing to David Piccini. My question to staff is, the ERO deadline is December 4th, correct? And with that, is there any opportunity for the Conservation Authority to send the correspondence to member municipalities for consideration for endorsement? And I ask that because I'm hoping that Town of Cobourg Council will be addressing a staff report about Bill 23 at our special meeting of council on November 28th. So we would have an opportunity to receive something.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can talk to the Eastern GMs now, the Eastern CAs, at least that letter has gone to standing committee today. However, that being said, we may be submitting it beyond that. So I will speak to the group to see if it makes sense, because I would think it would make sense that we would forward this letter. And it did not get sent to all of our watershed municipalities simply because there's new email addresses that we did not have. I did not have the mayor of Cobourg's new email address until quite late, and I knew he would not be able to, consider it because, but I will look into sending this because I would like to send it to our watershed municipalities to see if it could be endorsed, and then that would go forward. So again, sending it to Port Hope, Cobourg, the Eastern, it wouldn't go to Clarington because Clarington is not part of what the Eastern region considers the East, just because they're in Durham. So if that helps.
It does. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions or comments on Bill 23? Don't see any, so can I have a motion to receive the report for information purposes? Greg, seconder, Vicky, all in favor? And it's carried. Okay, thank you. And next we'll move on to correspondence. We have 2 items of correspondence. We have Bill 23 does not work for Eastern Ontario. Can we have a motion to receive and file that one? That's the second item.
Mr. Chair, so excuse me, sorry. This is the one piece of correspondence that I did say note and file, but I would ask for the board's, that the motion change to the board's endorsement. Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority did sign this letter. And what I would ask if the board could endorse this letter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had the 2 mixed up, Linda. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Not a
Okay,
problem.
so we'll go back to the first one then. We'll go Eastern Ontario Conservation Authority's loss of local decision-making. Can I have a motion just to receive that one for information?
It's all
purposes?
one letter, Mr. Chair.
Oh, it all comes under one then.
That it's a really long title.
Okay.
It's Eastern Ontario Conservation Authority. We
Yes,
lost
yes,
local
yes, yes.
decision
I'm
making.
sorry,
Bill
yes.
23 does not work for
Yes.
the.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we need a motion to endorse this. Sorry, I apologize. Nicole, you had your hand up. You're good
Yes.
with that? Yes. Can I have a seconder to do that, please? Vicky, all in favor then, please? And that's carried. I do apologize. Next up, we have applications that fall under the Ontario Regulation 16806, and that's they've already been approved by the executive. So got a motion to receive those for information, and if there's any questions, we can get to those after the motion. Mover, please. Margaret, seconder. Tracy, is there any questions on those at all? Anyone? There being none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And then we have the minutes of the Ganaraska Recreation Users Committee minutes, and those were November the 3rd, 2022. Have a motion to receive those for information. Mover, please. Tracy, seconder, Bruce. Anything from those minutes? Anyone? Tracy, yes?
Do you want me to give you a quick recap?
Sure. If you would, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, and through you. We did receive updates of the Winter Trails Forestry update and requirements for trail maintenance partnerships, and there was a really good discussion regarding the insurance component and making sure agreements are put in place, and continuing through the trail cleanup. We also, as like in the meeting, we really discussed, the informed work plan, how we're going to move through the recovery, the extension of the memberships, the details for the forest maintenance, and updates on the GIS for the mapping. One thing, a couple items came up. The RUC does provide stewardship to a lot of different local users in the forest, and they appreciate staff using some of the RUC comments as it provides some insight to some of the users and the stewardship and the stakeholders in the group. And another part of the big discussion was, that utilizing that public discussion and consultation, and staff did a great job of addressing and acknowledging those. And as you can see in today's report, we've got a fulsome update. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Anyone with any questions for Tracy? There being none, all in favor then? And that's carried. And next up, we have new business, which is dealing with fees and the policy schedules. Linda, do you want to speak on this at all before we go forward with this?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, conservation authorities through the Conservation Act are required by January 1st, 2023 to actually post a fees policy and schedules. We're also required to post our fees schedules on the website. So our fee schedules are on the website. And this is the fee policy that is for all of our fees. It's not just the planning and permitting, the planning and development fees. It's for all fees. So it is a policy, as the members saw when they reviewed it. It covers all fees. So fees, now we'll talk about some of the development fees. They are based on a user pay schedule, and permitting fees, planning development fees are not allowed to supersede the costs of the actual work that's being done. Our fees do not. Our fees, our permitting fees right now are currently at around 60%. What we felt was because it is being proposed that all Conservation Authority fees, and again, all Conservation Authority fees for all works of the Conservation Authority, all programs, so our education programs, our rentals, we covered our freedom of information, not that those fees are changing, but any fee that a Conservation Authority charges, it is proposed that those will be frozen effective January 2023, January 1st. So anticipation of that, staff reviewed some of the fees. Of course, the membership fees remaining the same, there would be no increase. Some of the fees at the Forest Center were slightly increased for some of the weddings. And that was anticipated in 2023 anyways. We had a schedule when we were booking 2023 weddings or 2024 weddings. And all we've done is written those down. So, but we did look at the planning fees and they have been adjusted at a 75% cost recovery. And again, when we look at, we did follow our own, the policy that we looked to the neighboring conservation authorities and other areas to see what others were charging so that we knew we were in line. So the policy before you speaks to how we charge fees, how we review fees, and it also has a line in it, which some of the other policies, all of the ones that are being developed, a lot of conservation authorities held off and they're developing theirs this month, states that any legislation nullifies any increase in fees. This policy states that if there was an increase in fees other than a cost of living increase, it would have to come back to the board to be approved. But if there's a legislation that steps in place, there wouldn't even be a cost of living increase. So I'm asking the board to review the fees policy that will have and schedules that will have to be placed on our website, which of course a lot of our policies are, and the schedules would be also on our website. And again, a lot of them are, but there are probably a couple of schedules that are not, like the rental of the Millennium Building and some of those fees, which would be on the website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Questions for Linda on these fees and schedule? Anyone? Can I have a mover then to approve the fees and schedules as presented? Mover, please. Greg, seconder Tracy, all in favor. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, Linda, and thank you, everyone. Can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting then? Motion to adjourn. The hockey game's on. We can get right to it. Anyone? Tracy, she's going to move to adjourn, and Vicky's going to second it. And we are now adjourned. So thank you, everyone. And again, congratulations to all those that are coming back to the board. And we look forward to seeing you in December. Bye.
Mark, if I may just quickly, I'm not returning to the board, but it's been such a joy. It's been one of the highlights of my council term. So I really do thank Linda, yourself, and all of the board members for a wonderful 4 years. But I look forward to continuing to support the GRCA in any way that I can.
Well, thank you, Nicole, and congratulations on your now going to be the deputy mayor of Cobourg. So all the best to you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.